No one paid much attention to the small, stray puppy that had started appearing at the edge of the town's old cemetery, a forlorn place long overgrown with ivy and moss, its crumbling headstones leaning like weary old souls. But it was Maggie Sullivan, a retired nurse with a tender heart and a habit of morning walks, who first noticed something was not right. Each day as dawn broke, she spotted the scruffy brown pup, a mix of beagle and perhaps terrier, fur damp with dew, determinedly scratching at the same patch of earth beneath a forgotten oak, nose to the ground, tail wagging low but insistent. At first, Maggie thought it was hunger, or instinct, or mere curiosity. But as the days stretched into a week and the little dog's paws grew raw from digging, something deeper stirred in her heart, a mystery that refused to be ignored. Early one misty morning, armed with gloves and a small trowel, Maggie followed the puppy, whom she had secretly begun calling Rusty, to the spot once more, kneeling beside him as he scratched with frantic desperation. Gently moving him aside, she began to dig where his tiny paws had worn through layers of leaves and hardened soil. Inch by inch, the earth gave way until her fingers struck something cold and metallic. Brushing away the dirt, Maggie uncovered an old iron box, its hinges rusted shut, its surface etched with strange markings. Heart racing, she pried it open with a stone and gasped. Inside lay a small, faded journal wrapped in oilcloth, alongside a delicate locket containing a worn photograph of a young woman and a baby, their faces filled with a quiet, haunting beauty. The journal, though brittle, revealed an astonishing tale. Written in trembling script was the story of Eleanor Green, a young mother abandoned in the 1940s who had been buried in an unmarked grave after dying in childbirth. Her baby, it was whispered, had been taken by the town's wealthiest family and raised under another name, the scandal buried as deeply as Eleanor herself. Tears blurred Maggie's vision as she read the final entry. If anyone finds this, please let my child know they were loved. Word of the discovery spread like wildfire, drawing townsfolk and historians alike. But none were more touched than Maggie, who realized that Rusty had somehow unearthed not just a box, but a forgotten truth longing to be told. Moved beyond words, Maggie adopted Rusty formally, her home now echoing with his happy barks and boundless energy. And together they became local heroes, invited to town hall when Eleanor's story was finally honored with a proper memorial and her name restored to history. Yet on quiet evenings, when Rusty lay curled at Maggie's feet beneath a blanket of stars, she often whispered to him, voice thick with wonder, "You knew, didn't you? Somehow you knew." And though he would simply wag his tail and snuggle closer, in his eyes glimmered a wisdom beyond understanding, a silent, soulful knowing that sometimes the smallest paws uncover the deepest truths, and that even the most forgotten souls can be rescued, if only someone dares to listen. In the weeks following the town's emotional memorial for Eleanor Green, Maggie often found herself gazing at the little iron box now displayed in her home, a constant reminder of how a small stray dog had changed the fabric of an entire community. But Rusty, with his boundless energy and uncanny instincts, seemed restless, as if drawn once again by invisible threads toward another forgotten corner of the world. One crisp autumn afternoon, while walking Rusty along the wooded path behind the cemetery, an overgrown trail once used by mourners in the distant past, Maggie noticed the pup slowing, ears pricking, tail stiffening. Without warning, he darted into the underbrush, yipping with urgency. Calling his name, Maggie hurried after him, heart thudding as they emerged into a sunken clearing, half swallowed by vines and brambles. And there, tangled in an abandoned length of fencing, lay a young fox, its slender frame trembling, fur matted with dirt and blood, eyes wide with panic. It had clearly been trapped for days, unable to free itself, and its faint, desperate whimpers stirred something deep within Maggie's heart. Dropping to her knees, she spoke softly, her voice a soothing balm against the creature's terror, while Rusty lay beside her in calm submission, seeming to communicate in some wordless language that they meant no harm. With trembling hands, Maggie worked to free the fox, carefully snipping away the twisted metal that bound its leg and torso. The fox, though weak and frightened, made no move to attack, perhaps sensing the compassion in its rescuers, and when at last it lay free but unable to stand, Maggie wrapped it gently in her coat, tears streaming down her cheeks. With Rusty trotting faithfully by her side, she carried the fragile creature to the local wildlife rehabilitation center, where vets rushed to stabilize it, marveling at its will to survive. Over the following weeks, Maggie and Rusty visited often, watching with awe as the fox, whom the staff lovingly named Willow, slowly regained strength, her eyes losing their fear, her spirit blossoming beneath the care of kind hands. Word of the second rescue spread quickly, deepening the town's affection for Maggie and her remarkable little dog. Strangers would often stop them on the street, their own hearts opened to the quiet magic that unfolded when love and instinct guided the way. And on a crisp morning, weeks later, beneath a pale sun and scattering leaves, Maggie stood with tears in her eyes as Willow was released back into the wild, a graceful flash of red and silver vanishing into the trees. Rusty sat proudly at her side, tail wagging softly as if to say, "This is what we do. This is who we are." And as Maggie knelt to hug him close, whispering, "We'll be ready for the next one, won't we?" She knew in her heart that their journey was far from over, for in a world full of lost and hurting souls, there would always be another call, another rescue waiting just beyond the bend in the road. It was a few short weeks after Willow the fox had been released that life returned to a gentle rhythm. Maggie once again taking her morning walks with Rusty, though she noticed that the little dog's ears remained ever alert, as though tuned to a frequency only he could hear, forever on the lookout for another soul in need. The air had grown colder. Winter whispered its approach through skeletal trees and frost-dusted fields. On a grey and drizzly afternoon, Maggie bundled in her coat and scarf. Rusty trotting ahead, they took a longer path toward the old iron railway bridge that spanned the swollen creek outside of town, a route they seldom walked. As they neared the bridge, Rusty froze, nose twitching, body tense. Then, with a sharp bark, he darted toward the embankment beneath the bridge, where rivulets of water ran fast and cold. Maggie followed quickly, her heart tightening with each frantic yip he gave. Reaching the embankment, she heard it too, a faint, pitiful mewling, nearly drowned by the rush of water. Crouching low, peering beneath the rust-streaked girders, Maggie's breath caught. Tangled in a heap of trash and wet leaves, clinging to a collapsed drain pipe, was a tiny calico kitten, no more than 6 weeks old, soaked to the bone, its thin sides heaving with effort. The poor creature had likely been washed down during recent rains, trapped by the debris. Without hesitation, Maggie waded knee-deep into the icy stream, each step biting through her skin, hands trembling as she freed the kitten from its sodden prison. The kitten gave a weak cry as she cradled it to her chest, wrapping it inside her coat. "I've got you now, sweetheart," Maggie whispered through chattering teeth as Rusty danced anxiously at her side. They hurried home, Maggie gently warming the kitten by the hearth, feeding it drops of warm formula, while Rusty watched, head tilted in concern. The fight was not easy. The kitten, whom Maggie named River, hovered on the edge of life for 2 long nights, her frail body racked with shivers. But through Maggie's constant care and Rusty's devoted presence, a miracle slowly unfolded. River began to drink hungrily, her tiny voice growing stronger, her wide green eyes gaining light. Word of the rescue soon spread, and Maggie once again found herself humbled by the outpouring of kindness from neighbors bringing blankets, food, and small donations to help with River's care. As weeks passed, and River transformed into a sprightly, affectionate kitten, she and Rusty formed an inseparable bond, often curling together in a sun-drenched patch of floor, while Maggie read nearby, a portrait of unlikely friendship. One snowy morning, as Maggie watched them playing by the window, her heart swelled with quiet joy. Each life they saved stitched new meaning into her own, a testament to love's boundless reach. And though she knew they would rest for now, Maggie also knew, deep in her bones, that somewhere out there, another small voice was waiting to be heard. And when the call came, she and Rusty would answer without hesitation. Winter arrived in full force, blanketing the town in deep snow and casting the forest in a haunting, frozen stillness. Yet even beneath this cold silence, life called out for rescue. And it was during one of the bitterest weeks of January that Maggie received a frantic knock at her door. A young woman named Leah, breathless and near tears, clutching a soaked coat. Through chattering lips, she explained that while driving home the night before, along a remote country road, she'd seen what looked like a large dog limping across the frozen fields, then vanish into the woods. Unable to stop in the storm, Leah had returned that morning, but there was no sign, only paw prints and a faint trail of blood in the snow. Without hesitation, Maggie grabbed her rescue pack, bundled Rusty in his warmest vest, and followed Leah's directions to the desolate road, lined with frost-bitten trees. The wind cut like a knife as they set out, the air heavy with the threat of more snow. But Rusty's nose soon caught the scent, his small body determined as he led Maggie through drifts and tangled brush. The trail grew faint, blood staining the snow in smaller drops now, until Rusty halted, ears pricked, before a half-collapsed hunter's blind deep in the woods. There, huddled beneath the remnants of canvas and wood, lay a massive black and silver German shepherd, his coat filthy and matted, ribs showing through gaunt sides, one paw grotesquely swollen and bleeding. At first he growled weakly, eyes wild with fear, but Rusty, brave and gentle, crept forward with a low whine, lying flat before the shepherd, tail wagging slowly. Something in that moment, perhaps the trust between 2 canines, broke through the dog's terror, and as Maggie knelt, whispering soothing words, he allowed her to touch him. Working quickly, fingers numb, Maggie splinted the injured paw and wrapped the dog in a blanket, calling Leah and a local wildlife officer for help. The trek back was harrowing. Deepening snow and fierce wind fought every step. But with determination and care, they made it to Leah's truck and rushed the shepherd to the nearest emergency vet. The prognosis was grim. Severe frostbite, infection, malnutrition. But there was hope. Over the next month, Maggie and Rusty visited daily, their presence a balm to the frightened dog, who gradually began to trust again. They named him Titan for his immense strength and spirit, and day by day, Titan transformed, his eyes softening, his body gaining weight, his limp easing with therapy. When he was finally ready to leave the clinic, Maggie knew there was only one place for him, her own home. The day Titan arrived, he stood uncertain in the doorway until Rusty bounded up, nipping playfully, and together they explored the house, 2 rescued souls bound by a deep, unspoken understanding. That night, as snow fell softly outside, Maggie watched them curled together by the fire, a smile tugging at her heart. Each life they saved, each soul they welcomed, wove another thread in the tapestry of her purpose. And she knew, with unwavering certainty, that no matter the storm, no matter the cold, she and Rusty would always answer the call of those too lost or broken to call for themselves. It had been nearly a month since Titan came home, the house now alive with the soft rhythms of 3 hearts healing together. Rusty, Titan, and Maggie, a trio bound by trust and love. But life had a way of summoning them when least expected, and it came one frigid night in the form of a desperate voicemail left by Sheriff Grayson. "Maggie, we just got word. Someone abandoned a whole litter of puppies in a shed up near Old Mill Road. The snow's coming in heavy. We need you." Without a second thought, Maggie bundled herself in thick layers, grabbed her rescue kit, and with Rusty and Titan at her heels, braved the icy roads toward the derelict mill, headlights barely piercing the swirling snow. The scene upon arrival was bleak, a collapsed storage shed, half buried in a drift, no footprints but the faintest trace of small paw prints leading to its broken door. As the storm howled around them, Maggie pushed inside, heart pounding, and there, huddled in the far corner beneath a shattered pallet, lay 6 tiny puppies, their thin whimpers barely audible over the wind. Their frail bodies shook violently from cold, their coats were wet, bellies distended from hunger. One little black-furred pup didn't move at all. "We're too late," Maggie choked, but Rusty darted forward, nuzzling the unmoving pup insistently, whimpering with urgency. Driven by instinct, Maggie scooped the cold bundle into her coat, massaging it desperately as Titan helped gather the others. Working with relentless focus, Maggie revived the tiny one with chest compressions and warm breath. And after a tense minute, a faint, fragile cry echoed in the dark, igniting hope. They raced back to her car, turning it into a makeshift warming station, wrapping the pups in emergency blankets as Titan and Rusty watched anxiously, both knowing the stakes. The drive home was a blur, the storm battering them mercilessly, but Maggie's will refused to bend. At home, with heating pads, formula, and tireless vigil, she and the dogs worked through the night, fighting for each tiny life. Dawn brought fragile triumph. All 6 puppies had survived, weak but alive, clinging to the warmth of blankets and the presence of the animals who now guarded them like sentinels. News spread fast. Rescue Paws posted the miracle, and donations poured in. A foster network stepped forward. But Maggie couldn't part with the smallest one, the pup who had nearly slipped away. She named him Hope, a living symbol of the will to survive. And as winter melted into a cautious spring, the puppies thrived and found homes